Oh no, what up? Welcome into the Week 5 Waiver Wire Q&A presented by FanDuel. I'm your host today, JL, joined by my friend JJ Zachariason, owner of LateRound.com. You know him. Needs no introduction. How you doing today, JJ?
I'm good. It's actually a pretty fun waiver wire week. We haven't had like a decent waiver week. I feel like this season with like some depth to it and stuff, but
Right. Javante going down, tons of injuries.
tons of injuries. We don't root for injuries, but they do make
No.
fantasy football a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it's like something to do, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
What from week 4, apart from Javante going down, what were some of like the big standouts while we wait for some of these questions to come in? What really stuck out to you this week?
There's one thing that I first off, I'd say probably like from a usage standpoint and stuff, like there's, I think the Chiefs backfield is still really interesting in the way that people are sort of viewing that, where, I like clearly regression is going to hit Clyde Edwards-Helaire in some way moving forward. But I think at the same time, his environment is good enough that he should be okay. And so I still have him ranked as like a mid-range RB2. And I talked about him being a sell candidate on my show, but statistically he's a sell candidate. From a market standpoint, he might not be a sell candidate. And another player that's kind of surprising that I feel like not enough people are talking about. And I have this, I'll have this in my episode tomorrow that drops in the 10 trends episode, but Josh Jacobs is the last 2 weeks, he's been a bell cow. I mean, he's
so good.
He's been a bell cow the last 2 weeks. And I feel like it's not being recognized that he's just been that dude. This past week, he had the best usage imaginable. I mean, like 20% target share, a large percentage of his team's running back rushes, huge snap share. So Josh Jacobs right now, like, I think the people who have Jacobs recognize what he's doing and understand what he's doing. So he's probably not easy to buy high on right now, but you never know. I mean, like, I don't think the market in general, people who don't have Jacobs, realize how good he's been.
Would you rather have James Conner or Josh Jacobs the rest of the season?
I think I might have Jacobs ahead of Conner right now. I'd have to look at I should actually pull up my rest of season rankings for this show every week because it's a lot easier to reference and stuff.
That's true. Yeah, so I sent them out.
Let's see. I have Jacobs one spot ahead of James Conner right now, JL.
Oh,
yeah. So that was a very good question.
Good one.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Just from like the draft to now, just 5 weeks.
Yeah, and look, I wasn't on Jacobs, but you got to adjust with new information. That's how you win in fantasy football. You need to not care about what you were right. If you drafted Kyle Pitts everywhere, reevaluate where you're at. I mean, not in life. I just mean with Kyle Pitts. Like
maybe in life.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in life. You're feeling pretty bad right now. But if you went hard for Kyle Pitts, then you're in a totally different situation now. In the way that you view him, or you should. You should not view him the same way that you viewed him entering the season. So yeah, I think that's where fantasy managers win and lose is by being able to be reactive and not caring about being right or wrong, just being right moving forward.
Right. Yeah. Like updating your priors, changing your strategy, not overreacting, but reacting appropriately, I think is the key. We got some questions flowing in here. We're about to hit these questions. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to FanDuel on YouTube, follow them on Twitch. We got amazing content creators putting out fantastic content every single day, including JJ and I. We're here putting stuff out. We got Victor here in the chat asking, this is the first time I've seen about this. I only listen to the podcast. So this might be the first time they've seen your face, JJ.
I always think it's interesting whenever that happens, because I mean, it must be weird if you've like listened to the show for a long time, because you hear me like screaming at you every morning, on the podcast. And then you see like, but it's always weird to me too, because like I've been doing video shows for like 8 years. Like I've been out there for a while. But so if you're seeing me now for the first time, I'm sorry that I look more disheveled than I typically do.
And we got Simon here saying, what's up? I'm in a guillotine league. Haven't made any big waiver wire pickups yet. Of that $1,000 budget, how much would you spend on Devonta Smith?
So here's the deal. Like guillotine leagues, I mean, my approach is generally to not spend early on in the season. Now, I will say I'm in 3 guillotine leagues, and this week I got second to last in 2 of them. So I'm still alive.
So you're feeling the heat.
Yeah, I felt the heat. I mean, I had those like late game, or late week injuries really got me. Like I didn't expect Amon-Ra St. Brown to be out and stuff like that. It kind of ruined me a little bit in these leagues. So, I'm going to spend a little bit more probably in those leagues this week, just because I was so close to being eliminated. But I do try to wait as long as possible. So Simon, it's good that you still have $1,000 left of your $1,000 budget. That being said, Devonta Smith, solid, like a wide receiver 3, probably in fantasy. I'm typically this time of year, teams in your guillotine league already have spent some money. You can probably go at like $60 to $70 or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be that insane of a bid. I don't think it's necessary to have that insane of a bid because, realistically, again, there's still what it's week 5. There's still 12 teams left in this league. So you just have to get better than 12th.
Right.
So, there's still a probability wise, probability is still and odds are still in your favor. So, I still am not going to go too hard for these guys. I think the way that you sort of roll with it is get as many like flex guys as you can, which is like a Devontae Smith, but keep bidding on those kinds of players, and get a lower cost for them versus just going hard and getting like a $500 or a $700 Nick Chubb or something like that. It's just a smarter approach.
It's because everyone in your league is going to do that, right? All your league mates are going to take that approach. So it's smart to pick up that value on the lower end side. And then Alex asking, how was our week in week 4 Scott Fishbowl? How'd your team do this week? What's your record at, JJ?
I took an L to the man asking the question here.
I see.
I believe that was the matchup if I recall correctly. He whooped me. His team is very good. My team was like fine. Like it's a very average team so far this year. So it was like, it was a fine enough team. But I scored 165. He put up 213 this week. So it's kind of impossible for me to get that W.
Yeah. What are you going to do at that point? My Scott Fishbowl team is terrible. So I don't want to talk about it. Victor is asking Tyler Algier or George Pickens, better player for the rest of the season. Obviously we have Mitchell Trubisky being replaced by Kenny Pickett. What do you think about Tyler Algier or George Pickens? Which one are you prioritizing on the waiver this week?
Yeah. So look, if you have this strong opinion that you like Pickens more than Algier, I'm not going to stop you. If you think that Pickett's going to favor Pickens more than Deontay Johnson, I don't think that's the case. I think that he's still going to go with Deontay. I'm looking over my other monitor because I'm trying to see where I have Tyler Algier in my rest of season rankings. I think I have Pickens ahead. So if that's the case, I'm gonna have to open my actual spreadsheet to make sure that I'm not.
Gotta check the source. Gotta check the mainframe.
That I'm not doing this improperly. I don't have necessarily a strong opinion. I mean, I think the way that I would view Tyler Algier, just generally speaking, is that he's a pretty good prospect. My model liked him a decent bit. I guess I do have Algier ranked ahead of Pickens right now. So I do have Algier ranked ahead of Pickens right now. And the reason for that is, in situations like this where you get a rookie running back stepping in, there's a chance, if he does hit, there's more upside with that player in fantasy football as a running back hitting than a wide receiver hitting like that. And not only that, but you have Kenny Pickett stepping in, which is an upgrade of where they were with Mitch Trubisky. But historically, rookie quarterbacks have not been good for their personnel in fantasy football. So you get this combination of a rookie wide receiver with a rookie quarterback. I love George Pickens. I think that the ceiling is certainly there. I would try to add both of them if I'm being honest with you. I think both of them are very, very worthy off the wire this week. If you want to go Pickens over Algier, I'm not going to stop you. He's a more talented player at his position. So, doing that is totally fine and reasonable. And Damian Williams is coming back next week for Atlanta too. And so that could cause issues for Algier. But the bottom line is there's an opportunity here for this rookie running back who I thought was kind of undervalued in the draft. He looked really good in my model versus where he was drafted. You don't often get these like bigger bodied rookie running backs who can catch passes out of the backfield, that combination. And when you do, I think you should try to pounce. So I like Tyler Algier from a ceiling perspective at a scarcer position, but if you want to go Pickens, I have no problem with that whatsoever. It sounds like you would rather go Pickens. I'm not going to stop you at all because obviously the talent is there. He's better at his position than Algier is at his.
Yeah, this comes down to a bit of your league as well, or your team, maybe more specifically, is what position do you need, right? Because Tyler Algier is a great or a running back with an opportunity in front of him. George Pickens is a wide receiver, and your team probably has a need for either more wide receiver depth or more running back depth. Something you said I think it was over the summer, JJ. I remember you talking about Tyler Algier. For some reason, sticks out in my mind as like, if he gets the opportunity this year, he might be one of those players who just pops off. But like, I remember you not being like super impressed with him from the off season, but specifically saying if he gets that opportunity, this is the type of guy that can capitalize on it.
Yeah, look, one of his comps was James Conner in my prospect model. So like he's not like the most explosive dude in the world, but he's a big bodied guy. And again, he can catch passes. He's a 3-down back, or he can be a 3-down back. I think that's valuable. I mean, when you can find that combination, like this is pretty similar to how I felt about like a Ramondre Stevenson, another guy who could catch the ball to the backfield, bigger bodied back. When you can utilize those players in that way, there's a lot of value in that. So I think Algiers a good player. Bottom line, I'm not going to stop you if you want to go with Pickens. Again, because Pickens is uber talented, but I don't really buy that Pickens is going to see a higher target share than Deontay Johnson. I think Deontay Johnson is still going to be
still the guy. Yeah, that makes sense. Jordan in here asking, how will the Bears use Khalil Herbert once Montgomery is healthy? We saw Khalil Herbert have a few really high upside games, high performing games last season, and they stopped using them. Do you think that's going to happen again this year when Montgomery comes back, JJ?
I would say probably not to the same degree as it did last year, where he just sort of like disappeared. I'm thinking more 65-35 split, 60-40 split when Montgomery's back. So yeah, I mean, I think Herbert is arguably a better player than David Montgomery, and it's not like this regime is tied to David Montgomery. He's going to be a free agent after this year. More, it's not a lock that he's going to be around next year. And so I think that there's a real chance that Herbert is just a better player. Do I think that the coaches are going to follow suit? Not necessarily. So we'll say 60-40 in favor of Montgomery, maybe 65-35.
I think that's totally fair. I'm a little less bullish that they're going to see the right path here, which is use Khalil Herbert. He's fantastic. He looks great. Derek in here asking, what do you think about Gibson once Brian Robinson returns? Brian Robinson was activated last week and should be returning week 5, if I'm not mistaken, last I heard. What are you thinking? How are you thinking about this Washington backfield?
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem with Gibson is that if and when they're in a negative game script, he's not on the field. I mean, they use JD McKissick. So now you're going to throw someone who's going to compete with him on early downs and who has a 3-down skill set. I just think it's arrow pointing down for Antonio Gibson. It's been that way. I had him as a sell after week 2 because they had 2 pretty easy games to start the season. Well, Jacksonville ended up being a better team, but they were at least, they had a neutral script in that game. And they played Detroit, I think it was in week 2. And obviously Detroit's been horrible against running backs. So I'm not bullish on Antonio Gibson whatsoever. I think if Brian Robinson is healthy, just assuming that we got to approach it the same way that we were going to approach it entering the season before the incident happened. So, I don't think Gibson, I think Gibson's like a RB 3 or 4 in most formats.
Is Brian Robinson worth picking up off the waivers this week?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pick him up, that's totally fine. But, I don't see a reason to believe that, I think it's fine just to throw the dart. There's a difference between like adding a guy off the waiver wire and trading for Antonio Gibson, right? Adding a guy off the waiver wire, the cost is not that significant. Trading for Antonio Gibson, it is significant. Right. And so, if you just want to add him to see what happens and say, oh, maybe Brian Robinson's really good, and he might be really good, then that's fine. But I think that realistically, from like a reasonable range of outcome standpoint, I don't know where the ceiling is going to come from any of these guys in this backfield.
Yeah, Antonio Gibson just screams trap to me. And we just seen these like surface level usage stats just go down each week, and it's not very promising. It's not what you want to see.
Yeah.
Kid Tricksta asking, do we play Jonathan Taylor this week? Jonathan Taylor dealing with an ankle injury, right? It's ankle.
Yeah.
Are you playing Jonathan Taylor? You have enough confidence in him?
If he goes, I'm playing him. I'm not benching Jonathan, especially, I mean, it's a good matchup too. I'm not going to bench Jonathan Taylor if he goes.
Those types of players are so nice because it's like, if he's playing, you're in, otherwise no. And it makes that decision nice and easy.
Yeah.
Jordan asking, who is the better waiver wire pickup in Denver? Mike Boone or Latavius Murray? Mr. Journeyman, Latavius Murray.
This is $1 million question right now. I feel like a lot of people are asking this. I'm going with Mike Boone. I still think that Boone at least has this, like, he's been good in like the limited action he's gotten throughout his career. Latavius Murray's been fine, but he's also very old. I know that people were looking at last week and they're saying, oh, he looked good last week. It's like, okay, it's a 1-game sample, guys. Like we saw him last year not be very great. And someone to write home about. And so I'm going to say Mike Boone. He's already on that team. He already knows the system, all that kind of stuff. It's not like it's difficult for running backs to learn systems though. Right. I'm going to lean Mike Boone. I think there's just more ambiguous upside there with Boone versus Murray.
Yeah, I'm with you. A lot of Latavius Murray's value comes from those like red zone touches too, just like stealing that goal line work. And I'm just not going to rely on that in a brand new team this week,
Yeah.
Austin asking Robert Woods or George Pickens. I guess this is a waiver wire. So Robert, which of these two guys are you prioritizing?
I mean, look, Woods has probably a better projection, but I'm going to go with ceiling and probably lean George Pickens. I just, there's just that interesting ceiling, intriguing ceiling. What happens if he really does hit? What happens if Pickett does target him at a higher rate, which is still possible. I know I talked about Deandre earlier. So I'm still going to say George Pickens, regardless of that. Woods is fine. I understand Treylon Burks is injured and everyone's, he's going to see all these looks. It's like, you can't just assume that that's going to happen. Number one. Number two, it's not like this is that attractive of a passing offense. So I'm going to lean Pickens there.
Right. This Tennessee Titans team, like offense and defense, have just not looked good at all. It's just looked completely stalled.
Yeah.
Nick asking, can we drop Elijah Moore? It's a time to drop Elijah Moore.
I would not. He's still running the most routes on that team. He's still playing the most snaps on that team, a wide receiver. This past week, didn't necessarily have the better matchup in that offense. Zach Wilson's back. He might favor him a little bit more. But it's concerning for sure. I would still hold Elijah Moore because he's incredibly talented. He's someone who looks great in my model. Like, odds are in his favor in general for year 2 and year 3. This being year 2 for him. So I would be holding Elijah Moore. It's just sometimes players go through tough stretches. And also there's just a lot of moving parts within that Jets offense. So I can't imagine there being a better like dart throw, high upside stash than Elijah Moore on your waiver wire.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. It would depend on who you're picking up, and I'm with you. I can't imagine anyone having more of that upside. That makes sense. Kyle Phillips gets Alex asking Kyle Phillips, does he get a significant bump up in PPR with Treylon Burks being out?
So I liked Kyle Phillips a lot coming out, and I was really excited to see his target share in week 1. Obviously, it's not been the same since then. But the problem with Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips is not a perimeter wide receiver. They need to run 3 wide sets for Kyle Phillips to see the field because he's a slot receiver. So I think, unfortunately, Nick Westbrook-Akine is probably the big winner within that offense with Treylon Burks out because he's going to play the perimeter, and then Kyle Phillips will be on the field. In these 3 wide sets, he's probably going to play a relatively similar role. Now, with that being said, when they are in those sets in that 11 personnel, Kyle Phillips will probably get a little bit more volume his way just because the competition around him isn't necessarily as strong. I think Phillips in deep leagues is still a decent stash. But I don't think that he's like the main beneficiary from this Treylon Burks injury.
That makes sense. And like you said, it's not like the opportunity is fantastic there in Tennessee. For whoever it is. Jay asking, what are we doing with Darnell Mooney, the moon dog, as someone was saying to me, Andy Barons was saying or something recently.
I would hold him. I like, you can't trade him. Maybe you can drop him in like a 10 or maybe 12 team league. But the peripherals are decent enough, or they were last week. They're just not throwing the ball that much, and they're not generating that much yardage. And so it's just a mess, but I don't know what else you would do. I mean, you're either trading him or dropping him because you're not starting him or stashing him, right? Can't trade him because no one's going to be trading for him. You can't start him because he's not reliable.
It's not very good.
You're either stashing him or dropping him. And I don't know if there's that many. I mean, there might be some out there. Like, I would probably take George Pickens over Darnell Mooney rest of season, for instance.
Just upside. Why not?
Yeah, right. From an upside standpoint, you might as well just go for it. But aside from that, Tyler Algier, if you want to do that as well, makes sense. But I think he's more of a stash.
Yeah, that is brutal, man. I know a lot of people were bought in on Darnell Mooney this year, so I understand that pain.
Yeah.
Hardik asking George Pickens or Isaiah Pacheco, running back, if you were to choose one.
I'm going with Pickens over Pacheco. I love Pacheco. I think he's a great stash, but you have to go with Pickens there.
You're Pacheco hype man this offseason.
I was. But the thing with the Pacheco like hype stuff is that all started when he got drafted. It wasn't like it was pre him being in camp and getting all that love. And then his ADP just shot up into like the single digit rounds in some drafts. I'm like, I'm not part of that hype. I'm part of the post draft, get him in your rookie draft hype. And so,
you guys took it too far.
Yeah, like late round patrons and myself have Pacheco all over our dynasty rosters because we got him in the 4th round because he was free then. Then he rose up to the 2nd round in rookie drafts later in the season. So it's a little bit different. I at least want to throw that caveat out there that like it was, he is a in my prospect model, he comped to Damian Williams best, and Damian Williams thrived in that Andy Reid offense. I think we all saw how good Pacheco might be this past week. He just runs really, really angry. It's really fun to watch.
Someone on Twitter was like, he just runs like it's his last run.
Lewis
or
Riddick.
like
Yeah, Lewis Riddick
so
did.
funny.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. It's a perfect way to describe it too. Which, by the way, you mentioned your Patreon. If you aren't already, go check out lateround.com. It is the best fantasy football resource out there. I can say that confidently because I am a patron. So I'm speaking from a point of truth here, and I would never lie to you, my wonderful people of FanDuel. I would never do that. Another question from Derek. Nope, we already answered that one. Not that one. Brian Robinson or Raheem Mostert?
I think I might have Mostert ahead. Yeah, I have I have Brian Robinson ahead, actually. Mostert, it's one of those situations. I had this conversation today with a patron where it's one of those situations where if you need projectable volume, like if you need someone to fill in a flex spot like immediately, then get Mostert. If you need just pure ceiling, I think that Brian Robinson's the pick.
What is Brian Robinson's ceiling? Is
RB
second, third round pick?
He was a day 2 pick. Yeah.
Day 2 pick?
Yeah.
You think he could be like a RB3, RB2?
Yeah, I think that it's possible, but it's more possible. Like there's contingent upside for him too. Like if something happens to either J.D. McKissic or Antonio Gibson, whereas Raheem Mostert is completely dependent on something happening to Chase Edmonds, and even then, I don't know if how they would handle that backfield.
Right, that makes sense. We got a question from Tyler in here. Should I trade away AJ Dillon for DeAndre Swift PPR?
I have Swift higher, so yeah, I would do that. I hate same position for same position trades, but I would do that because there's a loser in that trade. I mean, whoever doesn't do,
doesn't make your team better. How'd you describe it you described it with Simon the other day pretty well. I thought it was like musical chairs. That analogy.
You're just playing musical chairs.
Yeah, and that's essentially what it is. So I wouldn't go for that trade either.
Yeah.
Let's see. How much fab would you put on guys like Boone or Murray? So how much we talked about Boone, talked about Murray. You said Boone is your guy out of the two of them. How much fab are you willing to put down on these guys? Like, what's the opportunity here?
Yeah, I mean, look, free agent budget is very, very dependent on your league. It's whether you're in an 8-team league or a 14-team league, how people generally spend in your league, whatever. So if we're looking like a 12-team normal, typical league, probably spending like 15 to 20% on Boone, maybe. And then Murray, I'd probably drop that down by 5 to 10%. And then Robert Woods, again, I don't really think Robert Woods is like an absurd ceiling. I think Pickens has more of the ceiling. I think Pickens is probably like a 25-30% type guy. Maybe even higher if you really need a wide receiver because the talent's there. And then Woods, I'd bump it. I'd probably bump Woods to like, if a guy like Woods is on your waiver wire, it's probably a fairly shallow league. So I'm not going to be that aggressive in getting Robert Woods because a guy like Woods in a shallow league, you can find off the waiver wire each week.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, those so many of those types of receivers. I'm cracking up in here because Daddy FanDuel in the chat says, "What's the deal with Alexander Madison?"
What is the deal? Oh man,
how you feeling about Alexander Madison, JJ?
I think he's a good stash. Obviously, we saw Dalvin Cook is not 100%. He's wearing that brace around his shoulder. But he did get a lot of work. I mean, he saw like a lot of the work at the end of that game against New Orleans and London. So I think Dalvin Cook is actually going to be fine. But Madison's probably the best handcuff in fantasy football, I would say.
Yeah,
so
he's just
got to roster him.
So good when he fills in. He's just so good, so good. Is Ayuk droppable for Pickens or Robert Woods?
No, I think I have Ayuk over both. If you want to go Pickens, I'm not going to stop you, but I think I have Ayuk ahead of Pickens right now. Sorry, I keep referencing. Yeah, I do. I'm going Ayuk.
I would go Ayuk as well. We'll move on from that one. Let's see. So I got a question here, but Gordon is RB1, isn't he? And I want to take this opportunity. What do you think the upside is for Melvin Gordon now with Javonte Williams out? Do you think that he's going to get? You think he's going to be the workhorse, or that he'll get like a similar split mixed in with these other guys?
I think that he will see more work on the ground, but I think that there's a chance that Mike Boone sees more work through the air in that offense. Playing as more like the third down back. Gordon is the RB1, on that team. I would rather have Gordon than Mike Boone and Latavius Murray, but in these situations, number one, you're not always going to get like a clean player off the waiver wire who's stepping into being like a bell cow back. It just doesn't
Right.
happen, right? So what we're doing is we're playing probability of, okay, well, what if they split the backfield up a little bit more than we think, similar to how they've been splitting up the backfield. And then the other question we should ask is, is Melvin Gordon the 1A in that offense? I think that probability wise, we'd probably give him like an 80% chance that he would be the 1A in that offense, 90% chance, but there's a chance that he's not. And that Mike Boone just outplays him because Melvin Gordon's been putting the ball on the ground a lot. And so that's why you're spending up for these other running backs, is because you can't assume going into waivers, going into anything fantasy football, you can't make so many assumptions that you think you know what's going on, especially at the running back position, because coaching decisions drive running back production and volume so much, right? At the end of the day, they have to be on the field in order to get production. And so we don't know what that entirely looks like. Like, we can say this guy's more talented, this guy's more talented. It doesn't matter if the coach doesn't think so. Whereas at wide receiver, talented players get open and they get targets that way. So talent matters a little bit more there. So yes, Gordon's the RB1, but you should still be targeting Mike Boone and Latavius Murray.
I feel like NFL teams are when their main guy goes down in the running back position, I feel like more often than not, we see them, they don't like double down by being like, all right, this is the scheme. Now let's just plug the next guy up in there. It's they're divesting that then through all these other assets, because there's a bunch of running backs, right? And they're not separating themselves talent-wise. We saw the Ravens do this last year.
Yeah.
That Dobbins went and signed like 2 different running backs on top of their backup that was already there.
I did a study on handcuffs years ago. And I'm assuming that the numbers haven't really changed that dramatically, but people think that handcuffs are a lot better than they actually are. When handcuffs step in, and I did the study where I looked at top 12 running backs when they got hurt. So we're assuming that they're hurt, right? Which doesn't happen very often, realistically. I mean, it's not like every top 12 running back gets hurt every year.
Right.
And when these backup running backs step in, they typically give you RB3 or RB4 production, which is based on ADP. So basically the RB2 on that team by ADP, when they stepped in, they typically didn't do all that well, which tells you to not draft handcuffs. You can roster handcuffs as you go on in the season. But again, it just goes back to the idea that you think you know way more than you do about this.
Yeah.
Stuff. Like,
I remember
you cannot make assumptions.
I remember a lot of people got a little butt hurt from that study talking about drafting handcuffs, if I remember correctly. Nick Collins in here. We are wrapping up here shortly, so we're going to answer a couple more questions, and then we are going to get going. Nick Collins asks, can I trust Rashad Penny, or did he just play the Lions last week?
I think Penny is one of the best sell candidates this week. Yes, he had a great game against the Lions, but the Lions have been horrible against running backs this year. Not only that, but he's only seen 2 targets since Kenneth Walker returned to action. Kenneth Walker has 7 targets over the last 3 weeks. So they're still not using Rashad Penny. I mean, Rashad Penny had 8 targets all of last season. They're still not using him as a pass catcher. That doesn't scream goodness from a fantasy perspective when you're talking about Seattle, which I know Geno Smith's playing great, all of that, but I think that we would probably bet on Seattle being a below average team versus an above average team moving forward. And that means that they could see more negative game scripts, which is going to really, really hurt Rashad Penny.
Yeah, and Rashad Penny, I just can't trust him, man. I can't. He's burned me so much since the point he was drafted to now.
Yeah,
it hurts.
He's a sell.
And then Alex, this will be our last question. Is Rashad White a better stash and 14-teamer than Jaylen Warren?
Yeah, because he's in a better offensive environment. If something happens to his starter, then he's going to step in and be that dude just like Jaylen Warren would, but it's a better situation. Not only that, Leonard Fournette's never played a full season in his NFL career. So there's that upside too, that Fournette has been hurt. Not that I fully believe in injury proneness, but it's at least something. And Rashad White might have flex appeal during bye weeks, just given the fact that he might be like a 1/3 split with Lenny moving forward, maybe like a 25 to 30%. Whereas I don't think we're going to see that to that degree with Jaylen Warren. So I'm going to say yes, Rashad White, a better handcuff right now than Jaylen Warren is.
And I'm with you. And that is going to wrap up our week 5 waiver wire Q&A with JJ. If you haven't already, make sure you go check out lateround.com. Go follow JJ on Twitter at lateroundqb. The best follow on Twitter, period. Fantasy or not. That is cold hard truth. And while you're at it, hit that like button on this video. Subscribe to FanDuel on YouTube. Didn't mean to put that comment back up. Follow them on Twitch and a bunch of the other socials, TikTok, Snapchat, any other ones I forgot. Zynga is the one Simon always brings up. They're putting out amazing content, and we will be back Thursday, actually, doing some more playing our fantasy football game show. Stick around. We're actually doing our fantasy football game show on our channel, Front Yard Fantasy on YouTube. This should just redirect you, throw you right there. we will be back next week to hit some more waiver wire questions. Sound good, JJ?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Peace.